From the Black Swan Media Studios, deep inside a secret underground bunker, we're speaking to freedom-loving patriots from all around the country and the world. Welcome to the Resistance. This is John Crump, live.
Welcome back to the show. It is a Monday after an eventful weekend and an eventful Monday, actually, with the RNC going on, the announcement of J.D. Vance as vice president, the assassination attempt, Biden suggesting that we use battle bots to fight. Well, Biden said, we shouldn't use bullets. We should use battle boxes. And then the battle box. And I was like, what did he mean by that? Then I was like, oh, he means that we should use battle bots to fight.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, Biden in the battle box.
What about Mechagodzilla? That's not in the
battle bots is an awesome show. Hi, Johnny 3 Bar, Kurt 24, ADX Arms, Douglas, Zanti Misfit, and everyone else out there. I just wanted to name a couple people. Today we are joined by Suzanne Monk, and Rich has been talking to her, so Rich knows more than I do.
So Suzanne is part of the J6 project to get these people pardoned and get them out of jail, the get out of jail free card. So Susan, why don't you tell us what you're up to and what's going on?
Well, Rich, first I got to commend you on the Mechagodzilla reference, because that is my plan B should President Trump be unable to make it in office. I have promised all my friends that I will build a Mechagodzilla to break them out of jail. So thank you for the reference. We've got some plans in the works for that. Yes, I am. Thank you very much for having me. I'm the founder of the J6 Pardon Project. Our project is one we started back in December, January of 2024 this year, to help the president be able to do the full job necessary to provide presidential clemency for the hundreds and hundreds, over 1,500 people who have been denied due process and have been made victims of a weaponized Department of Justice. And so what we have been working on are three basic goals. Number one, to produce a strategy guide called How to Pardon the J6ers, a comprehensive strategy guide for President Donald J. Trump, which is a thoroughly researched body of work that has clear step-by-step instructions on what he needs to do, including replacing the U.S. pardon attorney, who is frankly a Merrick Garland appointee from 2022 with Harvard and Georgetown credentials from outside the agency, when inside the agency we had a perfectly functioning acting pardon attorney who should have been elevated to the official position, who had worked under multiple administrations, but unfortunately Merrick Garland saw fit to put a plant in that office to, in fact, as we know, create minefields for these individuals who have been denied due justice, who have been literally accused while being entirely innocent and then locked away for years, even decades, for doing absolutely nothing more than exercising the Constitution. So our first goal was to provide President Trump with this strategy, but we're also doing a database of all of the January 6th defendants on 22 different points of data and being able to present that to the president's team so that all the homework is done for him. Our third thing is to start the conversation. The American people need to know the injustice that has been going on with the January 6th defendants and beyond, other political prisoners, beyond just these individuals, the folks who were arrested for protesting abortion clinics. There are folks who basically were supporters of President Trump who have been rotting in jail for years, like John Woods, your gentleman, I forget his name, but you and I were talking about him, Rich, as well.
Yeah, we're talking about Matt Hoover and Justin Irvin. Yeah.
Thank you. Individuals who are basically have been already made victims of this political prisoner situation. So raising that conversation and making sure that the American people understand the entire brokenness of the justice system and how constitutionally the president has the authority and in fact the duty to be the check and balance on a broken justice system. And that's what we need. I've said many times I want President Trump to be the most pardoning president in all of history, but I'm hoping he starts with my friends who are rotting in jail right now for January 6th.
Do you have any contact with
Amen.
President Trump or anyone in his potential cabinet, I guess you can say?
Well, I'm happy actually that he's picked JD Vance, because I do have some friends that you know, in the Patriot movement, particularly those of us who have been supporting President Trump since he came down on the escalator. I call myself an escalator Trumper, and someone who has been an active individual. For example, during the closures of for COVID, I had started Reopen America on day 2 of that, and we started 22 different chapters across the country, different state chapters. Inspired them to happen. So, you know, somebody who's been very active. We've got a lot of great connections. So certainly I'm happy to see the pick JD Vance, because I know some people who know some people. But we've been in contact with Vivek. We're close with the Flynn team. Byron Donalds. We have some great connections through DC here, as well as I'm happy to say Michael Watley and Laura Trump will both have a copy of this guide in their hands by the end of this week. So what we're trying to do is make sure that all of the people around Trump, as well as Trump himself, and we have several angles. I know Trennis Evans, who we recommend as an advisor in the book to President Trump, has an opportunity to see him. We've got a lot of great chances to make those connections, and we're just working on getting everybody around him familiar with the strategy and getting this to President Trump through a variety of avenues that I can't reveal them all, but I'm certainly thankful for all of the people who have been very helpful so far in trying to make those connections. But I think the more important thing, not only to make one man understand how this strategy works, but to make the American people understand why pardons are necessary, how due process has been denied, and specifically the different types of things that the president is going to need to do. For example, the Department of Justice has made sure that every single one of so many of these individuals are going to be in the middle of their appeals when President Trump puts his hand on the Bible and swears into office on January 20th, 2025, which means they're going to all have to face a very difficult decision if President Trump just starts issuing pardons without a strategy. And that decision will be, do I continue to seek justice where my record gets cleaned and I get to go home an innocent man, or do I go free and get out of jail and get to go home to my family? Do I get freedom, or do I get justice? And that was not the country our founders intended to build for us, and they created a resolution for that. So what we're advising, for example, in this guide, is that President Trump used something that we refer to as a proclamation-style pardon, just as Jimmy Carter did for the draft dodgers in '72. You can still actually, if you happen to be a draft dodger, just FYI, go to the U.S. Pardon Attorney's website and you can file for that pardon today. What that means is these individuals will be able to file for a pardon at their time frame. So once their appeals are over. But in order to make that strategy work, President Trump would have to issue at the same time a commutation of all those sentences. Commutations deal with sentences, pardons deal with convictions. So those folks get to go home, seek justice, and without making that horrible decision. So that's one of the strategies we're advocating, as well as something really historic, and I'm excited for. We are advocating that the president use what is called the pardon of innocence. The first ever federal pardon of innocence was issued to General Michael Flynn. And fortunately, he did not have to actually use it. It sits in an envelope to this day, but it is a pardon that stipulates the—
Still, wait, can we stop right here? Sits in an unopened envelope.
Yeah, he has
because
not had
they wanted to win it without a pardon.
Correct. And Rich, that's a great point, because, you know, throughout history, when I was studying the history of pardons, one of the things I found very interesting is the number of people who turned down a presidential pardon for a variety of reasons. And one of them is that for the most part, accepting a presidential pardon is a conviction. It's an admittance of guilt. And that's how it's been interpreted throughout history, except and until we see this pardon of innocence that is issued for Michael Flynn. And so uh, General Flynn has not used that pardon, but he did accept it because, in fact, it states his innocence. And now, what's interesting is in the state level, governors use the pardon of innocence all the time. It's actually a very common style of pardon governors use, and when they use it, the state record, their criminal record is expunged and removed. So we're actually asking President Trump to take that historical step, which has never happened on a federal level, but is certainly well within the confines of my little friend, the Constitution here, and that we are asking him to add the step of expunging the federal record of those individuals who he offers a pardon of innocence to. Many hundreds of these individuals committed absolutely no crimes whatsoever, and they deserve this level of rectification and, in fact, financial restitution for the devastating effects the weaponized DOJ attacking them has had on their lives.
Amen. This is it's unbelievable to me. I think a lot of us believe, or maybe, kind of like fairy tales, like all policemen are good, all politicians are good, the Department of Justice is good, the FBI is good. You kind of believe that these are the good guys in doing the right thing, executing justice, and not thinking that it's politically biased or that it's revengeful. So I'm gonna share my experience with.
It's broken. Let me just add, before we even start talking about political bias, the conviction rate of J6 cases is 99.97 or 9%. It's ridiculous. We don't have any acquittals, really. We have charges that are acquitted, but no full acquittals. The traditional, the typical, before we even talk about J6, 97% conviction rate is what the federal government experiences on a regular basis. That means in any situation, if you walk into federal court for any crime whatsoever, you have a 3% chance of walking out innocent. And that is the thumb of the big government on the scales of justice. The system is broken long before we get to the political system, and it is now so broken by the politics that it is completely and utterly corrupt and dangerous, frankly, to all of us. Just disagree with the government, and you can find yourself locked in jail. Ask Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro.
Right, and what's amazing to me is they went after the Trump attorneys, they went after Trump's cabinet, they went after Trump's campaign workers. They violated attorney-client privilege. There was no bounds that they were going to stop at. It's dramatic and amazing, and it's basically 100% what a banana republic would do.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that the J6ers should be charged with anything? The ones that entered the Capitol.
Well, John, here's what I will say about that. The vast majority of individuals were there. They were charged with something called 18 USC 1752, knowingly entering or remaining in a restricted area. This charge requires that you would then know that the area was restricted. Now, unfortunately, for the vast majority of individuals, the signs informing them that the area was restricted were torn down early in the morning. Officers appeared in many cases to wave them in or to stand idly by. They gave them water bottles. There was no announcements being made in the building. They did not use the big voice, which is a giant speaker system, which I can hear from my house. I can hear it from my house here in DC. They did not use that on that day to announce that the area needed to be cleared, as was the law. When you find that a gathering, a peaceable assembly has passed peaceability and it needs to be dispersed, there are specific requirements into dispersing that crowd, none of which happened. So do I think that individuals who were allowed into a building be charged with knowingly remaining and entering in a restricted area they could not knowingly have entered because there was no indication of that for them to know? No, I don't think. I think that's a misuse of the law. And I think, frankly, that some of the cases we're seeing coming up towards the Supreme Court is that misuse of the law. So here's the thing. Now, do I think individuals that were charged with that law committed crimes that day that may need to be investigated, John? Yes, 100% I do. And I referred to one gentleman named Raymond Epps. Ray Epps has 1752 as his one and only charge, for which he got 6 months probation, while other individuals are spending 2 years in jail for the exact same charge. So what we have done is to make sure that the president has the capacity to be legally consistent, because charging anyone with 1752 when the signs were down and there was no way to know is wrong. That is a misuse of the law. However, there are individuals that are going to need to be charged for criminal activity that needs to be investigated under a legitimate Department of Justice, and probably a special prosecutor that investigates what really happened that day, including the pipe bomber, including who opened the doors, including how Michael Byrd falsely reported that shots were fired that day before he shot and murdered Ashley Babbitt. There's a lot of questions everyone in the J6 community has, and we want justice. We certainly do. So what we advise the president to do is to be able to rectify that charge with what is called an absolute and unconditional pardon. An absolute pardon does not prevent any future charges. An absolute pardon allows individuals to receive further charges. So while we are advocating the president issue something called a pardon of innocence for people who were truly innocent that day, as there are hundreds there are, and we are advising him to issue a traditional pardon that is full. That means it prevents future charges on this incident in the future. But there is an absolute pardon, and we have included that as an option specifically for this situation, because crimes were committed that day. Absolutely 100% no doubt. People died that day. People were complicit and dragged into situations. Innocent individuals were brought to very deadly and dangerous situations, and the people who did that need to be brought to justice. We want to make sure that the president can do that while remaining consistent with the Constitution and the law.
Okay. All right. That's one of the questions that I have, because it's usually they're all guilty of something, or none of them are guilty of something. So I just wanted to see what your opinion on that is.
We're really basing our assertions on pardoning all individuals specifically for the charges that have been weaponized, based on the lack of due process, and through investigating the hundreds and hundreds of cases and sitting individually in these cases, testifying in some of these cases that I've been able to do. What I have seen is repeated denial of the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment. These individuals are not being allowed to receive the evidence the government has that can exonerate them, particularly with regards to, let's speak about this, the violent individuals. We love to talk about, should we pardon the violent ones versus the non-violent ones? But that means we have to trust the Department of Justice that these individuals have been violent. When these individuals have been, one, denied video evidence the government has that would prove they were not violent that day. They have been lied about on the stand. We know what Harry Dunn and Michael Fanone did, literally perjuring themselves, claiming that they were attacked by individuals when they were on video proven to be in another whole area of the Capitol at that exact moment, lying on the stand. And so these individuals have been lied about. And that's how the Department of Justice has gotten a lot of these charges, these violence charges, or impeding officer charges, such as 18 U.S.C. 231 and 111. And so, yes, we are actually, I don't think we should use the Department of Justice standard on whether or not individuals were violent. I think we need to rectify the denial of due process. We in this country are innocent until proven guilty. And what is happening with these J6ers, and frankly, as a standard operating procedure of the DOJ right now, they are holding people pre-trial. You are incarcerated until convicted. That is where our country is at. They have put hundreds of people in jail awaiting a trial that takes years to happen, and then they deny them the evidence. They deny them questioning the individual who has accused them. They deny them the right to offer self-defense as a defense, and over their constitutional rights are denied. And hopefully the appeals process will rectify that, but I don't have a lot of faith in this justice system, legitimately so, nor should any other American watching what we have seen, not just for J6, but for many other individuals who have gone against the established elite.
Yeah, you brought up the 6th Amendment. A lot of people are familiar with the 4th Amendment, 5th Amendment, but there's some people that aren't aware what the 6th Amendment gives you. And I just wanted to state what that gives you. That gives you the right to face your accuser, quick and speedy trial, a trial by the jury of your peers and a lawyer. Just to throw that out there, because
Well,
there's
yeah, and what we
that
see with
aren't
these
that involved.
January 6th cases is that DC is the plaintiff in the case. The District of Columbia is one of the accusers in the case. It is also the entire source for the jury pool. So every single one of these juries, every single one, the ones I've testified in front of, the ones I sat as they convicted my 5 friends, the Proud Boys, for 4.5 months, watch these individuals wait to convict, including Enrique Charlo. They convicted for 22 years, got 22 years for his sentence, despite not even being present in DC on the day of the events. So,
But wasn't he a white supremacist?
he's the brownest white supremacist I've ever met. Bless his heart. And it was interesting to watch, actually, so many of the facts come out about the Proud Boys organization, and actually their great diversity, and certainly great amount of social engagement and charitable work. I have always considered them more of like a Kiwanis club of young boys who drink too many White Claws than anything. But frankly, when we see what happened, just recently with President Trump, frankly, I feel like we miss them. We miss and we've seen what the deep state has done. It's not just dismantling the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the anti-abortion community. It's dismantling all of us. It's trying to take on everyone who might oppose anything other than their globalist agenda, and it's putting these people in jail and in torturous conditions. And it really doesn't matter, even if they don't like your politics, or your politics can be nothing. You can just be a useless eater. There's an inmate I came across through the January 6th defendants. His name is Daniel Wingo. He's an epileptic who unfortunately had a very bad day meeting the cops when he was very depressed after a grand mal seizure, and they approached him aggressively. And he has spent 3 years awaiting trial in jail. And the reason I know about him is the other January 6th inmates informed us of an inmate who had spent 4.5 hours having a grand mal epileptic seizure in a pool of his own blood in one of our prison facilities, awaiting trial. This man is innocent until proven guilty, and they're happy to let him die. So we have a real problem with our justice system that is far beyond politics. They have been entirely corrupted with their own power, and we're going to need real reform throughout the justice system, and that includes our correctional system and the Bureau of Prisons, top to bottom.
Yeah.
So there is no catch and release for U.S. citizens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, there's not. There is no catch and release for. Well, to be fair, there. It's funny, there is, because I live here in DC. So if you do a little carjacking, you might get caught and you might get released. But if Matthew Graves decided that you like the wrong politician, you might spend 3 years in jail waiting trial. And that's the reality we have. That's a banana republic. We're just fancy Venezuela at this point. So we have to work at this election to get our country back, not just only through the ballot box, but through active, consistent engagement now and going forward. We can't sit idly by and let politics be something that only politicians play. We, the American people, need to be the people. As Ashley's mom, Mickey, says all the time, we, the people, need to be the people.
All right. You're talking about the deep state. A lot of people hear that term, but a lot of people don't know who the deep state is. Can you go into that a little bit?
Well, yeah, I'm happy to do that, because I've sat in our courthouses and I've watched case after case be adjudicated by judges who are happy to basically play what I've called the role of the fifth prosecutor. They're happy to hand over every single positive motion to the government, at the same time providing no assistance to the defense. And so, why would anyone do that? What motivation, we have to ask ourselves, what motivation would somebody have to be completely antithetical to the system of justice that they swore an oath to? And that's because there are loyalties deeper than the ones we see on the surface to the Constitution and to the oaths they swear. And that's where we begin to see the deep state. And sure, it goes all the way up to the big rich bankers who influence the world and continue to provide opportunities for endless wars, as we see over and over, because they make money off of that. We all know how deep that can go on a globalist level. But right here, in every part of the country, we have individuals who have been corrupted to put their own financial values or their own reputations over the will of the people they swore an oath to. And the individuals who are manipulating those folks are the deep state. And we all know they exist. We see them. We complain about them. Yet again and again, we have yet to manage to wrestle ourselves from their grasp. And frankly, we've never done better and gone farther than we did under the first 4 years under President Trump, which is why I'm going to vote for the guy with a nick in his ear, who stands strong and actually wants to defend the Constitution and take our country, give it back to the power of the people.
Yeah. So I want to talk about just something that I find interesting, and if I don't get it out now, I'm going to forget about it. But do you know Vivek Ramaswamy and JD Vance used to like hang out in college?
I do. Yes, I do. Yes. It's interesting the amount of small worldedness, let's just say it the nice way, small worldedness that we see in politics. And I agree, it becomes an ongoing red flag. And especially for somebody here who lives and operates amongst the political folks in Washington, D.C., the nepotism is high and extreme, and it goes way back. And so it always raises concerns. What I tell people all the time when they tell me that Congress is feckless and it's housed by a bunch of reprobates who are too busy having cocaine orgies, and I agree they are, but it is our job as citizens to make sure that these reprobates actually do what we sent them to Congress to do. It's fine to be upset that they are not the best representatives, but there are employees, and we have to take responsibility for the people we hire. And as a boss, you would never stand there and allow your employees to do nothing fail at their jobs and embarrass themselves without complaint or without engagement. And so we need to be active. And that's one of the things I say. If you don't like the job that a congressman is doing, that's all the more reason to be on his phone, not less. We on the right have a real bad tendency to decide to pull away, and we're just not going to engage somebody who we feel has disappointed them. And on the left, they don't do that. They get up, they blow up the phones, and that's how they keep. We always say the Democrats stay in lockstep. Well, that's how. And we certainly on the right have a little bit of a problem with putting our folks' feet to the fire. We need to do that. We need to keep doing that.
I think one of the problems is the left is hyper focused. They are a hive mind, basically, where you share 100% of every stance on every issues, where the right is a wider variety of issues. Like, to tell you the truth, Rich is more of a conservative leaning guy on the right. I'm more of a libertarian leaning guy on the right. Rich likes Trump. He's a MAGA Republican, I guess you can say. And I'm going to vote for Trump. I will say that, but he's not my favorite person. So I'm just saying that's the contrast.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is what I would. I wanted to speak. I'll speak to that. I'll speak to this point on that matter. What I have dealt with, frankly, as a January 6th advocate from the beginning is dealing with finding ways to cross the border of politics. So I ended up spending a lot of time lobbying up in Congress and having to convince members of Congress to go over to the DC detention center back when the words J6 would literally cause them to hang up the phone on you. And so in order to do that, it was important to understand that these things are affecting not just these small group of individuals in a partisan level, but every single other inmate that was going on in the jail. So we took that tactic that they need to go see the jail because every inmate is being abused. We have an abusive situation, and it gets worse when you add the politics, but certainly it is something that is ubiquitous to all of the Americans who are sitting in that situation. And that's frankly where we all should be at the same time. I would love whoever wrote Joe Biden's speech where he said, we're not about political violence, and we should come together. Until they got to the battle bots part, every now and then Joe says something smart, kind of like stay in the race. Yeah,
Well,
Joe, stay in the race, right? So we do need to be.
I'm kind of worried I bash Joe Biden too much. Maybe I should back off. I'm thinking about putting some Joe Biden bumper stickers on my car and maybe writing a check to the campaign.
Look, if he stays in,
what I was disappointed with Joe Biden yesterday, whoever wrote his speech, they threw in Whitmer and J6. I'm like, really? How about who was the Bernie Sanders dude that was shooting up all the congressmen?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Somehow
got that shot.
Yeah. I don't remember the shooter's name, but
we had a congressman shot here at a baseball game. I just like to remind them of that. So
that's what I'm saying. So Biden doesn't go to. I mean, we're talking about a firearms assassination attempt against a political the President Trump. But somehow he just completely goes to Whitmer and J6 and not the Bernie bro shooting up all the congressmen, which I think is crazy.
Doesn't it frustrate you? You have like 1 second where you're like, yes, we as a country should not be politically violent. And you guys have brought up all the people who are instigating the violence. That's like immediately we're at Whitmer, who has called for aggressive violent actions against people on the right.
With that whole Whitmer thing, I mean,
as has Biden himself. This is what's so frustrating.
There was 12 people plotting the kidnapping of Whitmer. 10 of them were FBI agents.
Mm-hmm.
So hold on a second. Can we pump the brakes here? Whitmer was a setup. J6 seems like it's a setup. Was the Trump assassination a setup also?
Well, the Democrats think it was.
Allegedly.
Well, here's what I will say. What I can genuinely understand, I think all of us, it's quite obvious. Either the Secret Service had one of the most egregious and embarrassing failures of security we have seen in modern history, or somewhere, someone along the way in the agency was complicit in allowing this event to happen. I'm not radical for saying those. It's either one of two things.
Right.
It's 150 yards away from the event. Why were there not Secret Service snipers on that building? I have been at many, many events. I live here in DC. I've protested in front of the White House. I know every single building. You can see them. They are prepared.
Oh yeah.
Proper
see them on the roof.
has a sniper on every building. There is no way under a functioning system that building would have not been occupied by Secret Service. So there are grave questions as to regards to the security of failure that happened at President Trump's rally. But equally, we can look at January 6th. As I have said many times, it was first and foremost an utter failure of Capitol Police to secure the building that they are required to secure. This is why they should have allowed the National Guard to be present, to provide the numbers they needed. They knew these numbers were coming. The mayor had blocked off whole areas of the city days before. Everyone knew. They failed to secure the building. You got to ask questions. Was that just utter incompetence or complicitness? And you got to ask the same questions with President Trump's assassination attempt, because it is the glaring failure becomes really hard to believe when you start to understand how many people are willing to go to great lengths to undermine this president and our movement.
I will say that you should never attribute to malice what can be explained by incompetence. I'm not saying that there wasn't any malice there. I'm just saying that there is a great possibility that it was just incompetence, but we'll find out. Hopefully, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, with regards to the assassination attempt, the level of incompetence scares me. When you have members of the crowd pointing out an individual armed, climbing up on top of a roof, and it takes 3 or 4 minutes before anyone even talks about that, even addresses that individual. And when that individual is not eliminated or what's the word they say when they have basically shut him down from operation. If he has, exactly. If that doesn't happen before he's allowed to get off several shots, something has gone horribly wrong. And frankly, I've seen the pictures. It's not like he's wearing a white roof costume. He's not that hard to see. So Is aerial surveillance even happening at these? I have questions. We all have serious questions.
Apparently, there was no drones in the air. One of the things that I do find interesting is Secret Service protocol is to do a site survey 72 hours before the event happens, and they didn't do the site survey until late Friday. And there was also a lot of those guys there were like C teamers. They weren't the regular security detail. So I mean, there was a lot that can go wrong. Usually, when something goes wrong, it's just not one thing that goes wrong. It's a culmination of errors. And Rich is a pilot, so he can tell you, like when a plane crashes, it's usually not because of one failure.
Yeah,
A combination of failures, and you might be looking at that, or there might be something more to
Well,
it.
this is what I will say. I think we live in a government that knows very well that if it provides if enough of those failures happen, then things that they don't necessarily have direct control over happen that occur in their favor. And that's what we have seen a lot of this regime. They allow the left to do very dangerous things. They allow Antifa to act. It's not that they are hiring Antifa to go around attacking people. They stand down and they present that culture of officers standing down in the face of political violence. So we see it over and over, and we are getting to the point where we now see individuals who are so emboldened that they will shoot at the president. This isn't the first time they've killed us. This is not the first time the radical left has killed individuals. But we'll all hear about Kyle Rittenhouse. We certainly don't hear about the multiple individuals who have been violently attacked and assaulted and even killed by radical leftists that we'll never hear about in the news because it doesn't fit their agenda. So there's a level of devious incompetence that allows the incompetence that allows really, really bad things to happen, that has the effect that they want, and it continues to terrorize the American people. It could be rectified at any point when they decide to follow the law and protect peaceable assembly. But we're not seeing that because it's a tactic that works very well, terrorizing and intimidating the American people to not use their constitutional rights.
Yeah.
So I got a question about J6, and this is something that kind of puzzled me, and I didn't understand. So on the day of January 6th, and maybe within a few days after, there were a number of arrests, and I'm assuming then they dropped off. But I was shocked. Now, I don't watch CNN, but my father-in-law does. And I'm like, hey, man, it's been a year. Well, it's been 2 years. Why every night is there blockbuster breaking new news about, J6? And I'm like, did they just have to, like, brainwash enough people to get a consensus that it's like, oh, yeah, we need to arrest grandma and throw her in jail? That's okay with me. It just seemed like it was a massive brainwashing campaign. When did the bulk of the arrests on the J6 people happen?
They continue to happen to this day. So there was it was a batch of arrests that happened maybe in the week or week after, a small batch. Then we saw a batch that occurred shortly after the inauguration in January. There was another big batch. A lot of my friends, like the Proud Boys, were taken in this batch in March of 2021. But it has continued on to this day. In fact, since in the last 7 months, over the last year, they have escalated their arrests. Prior to this, it was about one per day, one J6 arrest per day. We are seeing at this point, the DOJ is arresting approximately 2 individuals every single day for January 6th. They know they have a limited time to scoop this dragnet and to use this one as an opportunity to suppress a lot of politically active individuals, to suppress an ideology, but to create this idea, this mantra that they speak over and over and over, that it was an insurrection, that Trump was leading an army of people trying to take over the government. And they want to have as many folks they force through the system to teach us to never, ever try to stand up for ourselves again. and maybe for more sinister reasons. Maybe they're making good money off of it. I don't know how else to say. Maybe that's the situation. But yes, their arrests are actually higher. We're looking at having a database of over 1,700 people by the end of the year that we need to present to the president.
As far as the database goes, how many people are over 50?
There's a lot. It's actually kind of interesting. I would say that there's almost a divide between this desire to put young people just starting their lives, young fathers, young families, and then grandmas, literally old people. I've, I've got a chance to meet with the Parkers, Sandy and her husband, both of them, I think 65 and 68, who are currently serving, I think 7 and 8 years for really walking
Oh
through
my gosh.
walking in, walking out, doing nothing, harming no one, but because they were affiliated with the Oath Keepers. And that's what unfortunately is happening, is that they're enhancing these sentences based on First Amendment activity. So the kinds of things you might post on social media, posting a Gadsden flag is something that I've literally seen brought up in court as a potential terrorist activity. So anything you say, if you haven't, many of us have explained the traditional punishment for treason. And if you explain the traditional punishment for treason on your social media, this can in fact will be used against you in a court of law if you are charged with any crime that your politics may be relevant. They will bring that up and they will present it in front of a jury and try to show you as a murderous terrorist criminal. And they will then use that statement to say that you're violent and increase the years on your charges. They are using these preponderance of evidence for individuals like my friend Zachary Real, who is sitting in Petersburg right now doing, I think, 15 years for being part of the Proud Boys on January 6th. He committed no violence. They had no video that could prove in court that he committed any violence, but they created this preponderance of evidence that allowed them to enhance his charges and give him the higher amount of years on these charges. So they're doing this to folks over and over and over. That's why they've chosen 1512, the clause that literally was just recently shot down by the Supreme Court. Although, to be fair, the Department of Justice is not cooperating with that. So I have no good news to report on that victory about the Supreme Court, because it's not been a victory yet for the individuals actually facing that.
Explain what 1512 is and what happened in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, 1512 is 18 U.S.C. 1512 is the law that was created after Enron to prevent individuals from destroying evidence. Those of us who are old enough, we recall the jokes about the burning paper shredders, and they were just burning down the whole thing because they were shredding all the evidence. So Congress created 18 U.S.C. 1512, which would prevent the destruction of evidence.
All right. So they listed a whole bunch of things, in one of the line items in 1812 was the what is it? Interfering with an official proceeding.
Yeah, the obstruction of an official proceeding. And what we see when you read the law, Congress did this with a lot of laws. They had a very specific clause, and then they make sort of this blanket and other things.
What is amazing to me, do they have like legal chat GPT to figure out, like, well, wait a second, this one sentence of this law having to do with financial documents and spoliage of evidence, there's this one line here that we could apply to J6.
Yeah, and I can tell you why they've done that. They specifically sought out laws that have high sentences. So the maximum sentence on 1512, I believe, is 20 years.
So do you think they took, like, all right, these 100 laws have very high sentences, try and make it fit. Try and jam that puzzle piece into J6.
I can guarantee you that's what they did, because we've looked again and again at the laws that they've used. So 1512 has up to 20 years. 1752 has up to 10 years there was violent activity which they are falsifying, or just preponderance of evidencing, as we've seen. Even 40 USC 1740, which is a misdemeanor charge, if you have some of those other qualifiers, it now can be charged as a misdemeanor and has up to 5 years. So they have chosen specifically charges that they can manipulate with false violent charges, with various enhancement techniques, so they can consistently, if they choose, get 10, 15, 20-year sentences, so that they can get you to sit on that in front of them and hit them. If they hit you up for this plea deal, they want people, they have wanted people to say it was President Trump's fault. That's what they've looked for over and over. And frankly, there are folks who had to take that plea deal because they are facing otherwise the destruction of their lives. I can't judge.
So, this is the first time I've heard about this. So you're saying they're like, hey, we can put you away, like 2 counts of this, that's 20 years each, a couple of counts of this, that's 10 years each. But we'll give you a plea deal if you say President Trump incited you to riot on January 6th.
Yeah,
100%. Repeatedly, that has happened over and over and over. There are hundreds of individuals who would state exactly that with their hand on the Bible. Yes, 100% that's happened.
So they're not going after the J6ers. They're going after Trump through the J6ers.
Correct. This has been all an attempt to enact the insurrection clause of the Constitution, which is the only way you can prevent someone from being, elected president if he's engaged in insurrection. So it's all been on that illusion they're trying to create and continue to try to create to this day, obviously.
So this is kind of amazing to me because what we have seen, Trump speaks or Trump appears somewhere, we're going to hear every word. And he said, go peacefully and patriotically. And there's no mincing that. But if you have enough people bearing false witness saying, oh no, Trump told me to go. And well, he did say peacefully and patriotically, but that was a dog whistle. I know what that means.
Well, yeah, and certainly they have been very strategic in who they have picked. There were thousands and thousands of people there that day, and anyone who was inside the geo fence, which is a digital line that Google helped the government draw, all of those people have been investigated and are frankly at risk of getting charges. But they have been careful to choose individuals who are affiliated with active political groups. They started with Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and these affiliations and organizations. They secondly went after a bunch of individuals who have other charges, frankly, like Jeremy Bertino, to be very honest, who took a plea deal and testified against his friends, the Proud Boys. He was a higher member of the Proud Boys organization and testified against all of them falsely, known for a fact because I'm familiar with his testimony and the facts around the situation he testified to. But he took that plea deal because he was facing other weapons charges that the government wheeled against him. They knew full well, and they're choosing individuals who either have these criminal vulnerabilities that can be very manipulated, or frankly, people who have families and a lot of financial situations to lose. It's very difficult. I don't blame anybody who takes a plea deal because it is extremely an extreme amount of pressure the federal government is putting on these individuals to make those false statements against President Trump.
Wow. That's crazy. It's amazing to me. I would, probably have to argue with my father-in-law because he is a true believer. He is a true believer in, the good and plenty fairy, of course, somewhere in the Constitution is the good and plenty clause. And which is amazing because my father-in-law had his own business. He had employees. But he is, a red diaper doper baby Democrat. I mean, legit. And it's amazing to me that nobody, can't you, if somebody started prosecuting Joe Biden on crazy crap, I'd be like, hey, wait a second. that's a little out there. When they didn't go after Hillary Clinton for destroying and wiping with BleachBit her server, but they're going after Donald Trump for bookkeeping. They're going after, and I'll bring this back to firearms. If I, as a concealed carry holder, go into a place that says, no firearms, the only thing I'm guilty of is trespassing if I'm asked to leave.
And you don't leave.
If you have, right, if I refuse to leave. If you have grandma going into the Capitol, which I don't know when it's legal or not legal to walk into the Capitol,
Right.
The people's house,
Mhm.
That's just the craziest thing ever.
Well, even if you're a red light, if the cop is there directing traffic and he waves you forward, we all will ignore the red light and obey the police officer. So hundreds of people
Good
did
point.
that
You know
today.
what? Yes, yeah. And I've seen the videos of them moving the barricades and waving people in.
Well, yeah, and then on the other side of the building, we see law enforcement engage peaceful individuals who were not informed to disperse with so-called less than lethal weaponry used in a lethal fashion. I sat and watched the government's own footage where they took a less than lethal rubber bullet device that it says right on the barrel. You can see in the video, do not aim at head and face, may result in serious injury or death. And then I proceeded to watch the Capitol Police officer make headshot, 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 5
Wow.
headshots in a row. That's not a mistake. That is an egregious misuse of non-lethal equipment in a deadly fashion. That is the use of lethal force. The same thing when we see the flash grenades thrown openly into a crowd. All of these are entirely against the protocol of non-lethal weaponry, and yet that's what happened that day. And none of the individuals charged with any of the crimes were allowed to bring in a police expert to state that the protocol used that day was unusual, was inadequate, or was in any way not professional. So no one has ever been able to actually effectively litigate in court whether or not you are breaking the law by using your non-lethal weapon in a overtly deadly fashion against the manufacturer's instructions and your training. That to me seems like an overt criminal violent act by a law enforcement officer, much like Michael Burr did when he fired an unarmed individual who was certainly containable by other officers in the area and killed her that day, as happened with Ashley Babbitt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
this is
fad.
Yeah, this is height of Banana Republic. I would have never expected, as a younger person making my first vote, which I actually voted for the first time for Reagan, I guess 1983 or whatever, when the election was. I would have never expected our country would unravel to this. This is just really crazy.
Well, yeah, and frankly, look, as someone who lives here in DC, and we get to see a lot of political activity, a lot of protesting, there's a lot of protections for that, and there should be. And I have close friends with great patriots who stood up and gone to jail to protect the free speech rights of folks on the left, including Black Lives Matter and other leftist groups, because that's our principles. We believe in what the Constitution presents and what the founders were suggesting. And frankly, what John, I lean more your way, actually, with a very limited government and maximum liberty, that the founders intended to give us a system that provided us to basically leave us alone. And I argue, where's my tank at all times? I keep trying to explain that nowhere in
you could have a cannon.
Is it clear that I can't have a tank, and so I don't know why I can't have one. I got room in the backyard to make my own decision. But unfortunately, what we see happening is the power of the people that was granted and carefully delineated in our Constitution and in our values and principles is being undermined by some very wealthy, very powerful people who are happy to pick conservatives against libertarians, and frankly against my Democrat neighbors. With all due respect, Hunter Biden has gotten less charges for drug use in the District of Columbia than my Democrat black neighbors right next door's sons, who got SWAT raided at 6:30 for, I'm assuming, minor drug charges compared to leaving cocaine in the White House. So the two-tier system and the power of the elites to be above the law.
How do you know it was Hunter's?
Well, we'll just assume he seems to have a proclivity. So
I'm just saying, Sleepy Joe sometimes doesn't seem so sleepy.
I do agree. Or whichever one of them they seem to show up. I never know which Joe. Some of the times it's falling up the stairs Joe, and other times it's corn pop Joe. And I just never know.
I got a question. Nobody on J6 shot a gun in the Capitol, right?
Nobody had a
Nobody on J6 had any bombs going off in the Capitol.
No, interestingly, the only person who fired a gun in the Capitol was a Capitol police officer, Michael Byrd, killing Ashley Babbitt.
Well,
and the only
what I'm getting to
was a pipe bomb that they never found the pipe bomber for. And oddly, the pipe bombs directly are very similar to FBI practice explosive devices. So it's just very interesting. It seems to me like all of those really dangerous things were, and frankly, if in fact the government felt there was a bombing situation, why did they not clear the area? Why did not they? None of the protocols that would have happened that day, nor did they happen on the 5th, where I actually spoke in front of the Supreme Court. And we apparently had a biological scare. They tried to clear us all away and prevent our events from happening. None of which had any factual information about. So, yeah, it was.
What I'm getting at is there was a shooting at the Capitol in the past. There was FALN terrorists bombing the Capitol.
Correct.
These people, the FALN terrorists, all got pardons.
Sure. Yes. Correct. Or their charges, or even better, frankly, Rich, their charges get dropped. And we've seen that with so many of the protesters from the inauguration. We see it again and again, even the protesters that have protested in front of the White House now under Biden. But I can tell you that's what's an interesting thing when we see what happened in Pennsylvania just the other day. We know full well that if you pull out a gun in front of Secret Service, you get shot. We've seen it happen here in D.C. very quickly. A gentleman just maybe a year or so ago pulled out a firearm in that crowd in Lafayette Park in front of the White House and was quickly eliminated from the planet. So the idea that what we see, going on in Pennsylvania is anything like what Secret Service does, it just doesn't match what we see here on the ground. In reality, it's very different. So the government's lost its way. I don't know how else to say that.
Yeah, they definitely have. They definitely have. Yeah, it's a sad thing that the government has lost their way. I'm not for revolution. I'm for restoration. The restoration of constitutional republic.
Agreed. And that's actually one of the things that I think, and I talk about to President Trump in the strategy guide, is that the American people right now have no faith in the justice system, and it's before January 6th. It's been ongoing for quite some time. We've seen the criminals be, rushed through that revolving door, and we've seen more and more PTA members and political individuals be targeted. We remember the IRS targeting individuals back during the Tea Party days. We've seen it. We've seen it over and over. And one of the things I say is that if President Trump, once in office, doesn't take historical action to make change beyond the J6ers, but to genuinely do what he said at the Libertarian National Convention, which I was very excited to hear, and that is to form a task force to free and pardon political prisoners throughout the country. If we are not able to see that from this president, the American people will never, ever trust the justice system again. Bold action is taken to get our constitutional republic back, and we need to use the checks and balances of the presidency to do it, because we, the people, we can't choose a new Supreme Court, and Congress is just too big and stubborn to be wielded effectively. We need to be able to take that executive branch with one man who can stand strong. And I think Trump can do it. I'd like to see us even stronger version than what we saw in 2016.
Amen.
Yeah,
So people were asking about social media. I dropped your website, the J6 Pardon Project. Is there other social media where people can reach you?
Yeah, you can find me at Trumpertarian. So it's like libertarian. You just take the lib out and put Trump in on Twitter. You can find me at Suzanne Monk on Facebook. I do a lot of posting on X, and we do a lot of spaces right now. And we're certainly doing a lot of engagement. You can also message me on those sites. You can message me at my name, SuzanneMonk@gmail.com. You can email me if you would like to receive a digital PDF copy of the J6 Pardon Project Strategy Guide and read what we're advocating the president do yourself. I'd be happy to send that out. So shoot me an email with your email address, and I've basically been sharing that. We're proud to show the work that we've done. I've worked with some really great people, and we genuinely believe that if the president follows this strategy, the maximum amount of justice can be done, the maximum amount of clemency for individuals can be created, the max amount of consistency with our Constitution and the law, and frankly, even beyond, the maximum amount of rectification for not just J6ers, but for many other individuals, including John Wood, state senator from Arkansas, who has been sitting in jail for 7 years just for being the first guy to endorse Trump.
all right. Well, I think we are done here. I got to take off. I'm going to my in-laws' house. So we are going to get out of here. Thank you so much for coming on, Suzanne. You're welcome back anytime. And with that, we will see you tomorrow with a surprise guest.
Appreciate you guys.
Wait,
Thanks.
Richard's laughing because we don't have one yet.
Surprise!
So it's going to be
Well, I got somebody lined up waiting for the reply.
Oh, it was the guy that asked you?
Yes.
All right, cool. All right, that'll be good. All right, guys, and I will see you guys later.